the main part of the message is the exposure of the myth that there is such a thing as a seeker, something called a seeker, but can find something else called enlightenment. Because as far as the open secret is concerned, at a very early time in the life of the apparent human being, there's something energetic that happens, which is like a contraction in the body. And what arises out of that contracted sense is a sense of a me, a sense of identity arises. So suddenly, at a very early age, there's a feeling that there's someone in here, I am here. And that grows, and because that human form lives with many other human forms, then more and more there's a sense that I'm a real person because I'm living with lots of other real people. So I am real, I really exist as a person, as an identity, and I have free will and choice. That's real, and I live in a real story called the story of me. So I tend to call the self, or what people would think of as the individual, the me. So what arises directly, there's a sense or feeling in here of there being a me. What arises is the story of me. And what also arises with that sense of me is a sense of separation. So the me is an artificial construct which feels separate from everything. And it exists and only exists in a subject-object reality. That's how it exists, by being aware of itself. The sense of contraction takes the form of an identity, and then what arises in that identity is what's called self-consciousness, knowing that there's a self. And for the open secret, that is a dream state. It's a constructed state in which there can only be experienced the sense of everything being separate. So the me or the self lives in the experience of being separate from everything. And that is at a great depth, that's deeply dissatisfying. There's something dissatisfying about a sense of being in a separate world, separate from everything that's happening, apart from life. There's a sense of being apart from life. Many people don't recognize this, but some people feel that, quite sensitive people feel that sense of something missing. So they look for what's missing. They don't feel fulfilled. Money, all of those things don't fulfill that sense of being separate. So they look at a deeper level for the answer to that. They look at religion or therapy or maybe something called enlightenment. And basically what's being said here is that because the individual is in that artificial subject-object world, it can never find what it wants. Because what it wants, what it really longs for, is not an object. What it really longs for can't be owned. What it really longs for can't be grasped. There isn't something that the me can do to reach what it really longs for. And that's what we're sharing here. I mean, I'll go into more detail about this tomorrow, but basically that is the theme of this message. And what it exposes and what can happen is that somewhere the me that thinks it can find something for its own fulfillment can be driven into a sort of void, a sort of helplessness through this message. And then what's possible is that all that can be left is the sense of something beyond self-seeking, something that can't be grasped or worked for. And also what arises is the sense that what is longed for is constantly all there is anyway. It's already here. It hasn't been lost. So somewhere the me doesn't have to become worthy to find that which it longs for. What also can emerge in this sort of communication is the sense that actually what can happen is that the whole artificial construct of a me, that whole fabric, that whole sense of being separate, can suddenly simply collapse. So this is really about something that can be lost rather than anything that can be gained. What is lost is the sense that there's something to be gained. What is lost is the idea that I can gain something. I can have something for myself. Because all seeking is really a seeking for something that I can have. It's like a spiritual materialism, which gathers in and wants to own a state that then can be lived in. So please ask, we can talk about this and use words to illuminate the situation, and it's possible that something else will arise. But also what has to be said is that essentially separation is an energetic contraction. It's an energetic contraction held in the body. It has nothing to do with thought, the thought I am separate. It has nothing to do with the belief that I am separate. It has nothing to do with the idea that I'm separate. All of those things are simply confirmations of something that's a cellular sense in the body, held in the body. It comes and goes, but it's a cellular sense in the body. So no amount of comprehension, understanding, or any sort of process can ever get rid of that sense that's energetic. Nothing can get rid of it. Because in the end, the strange thing about this mystery is that when that contraction suddenly collapses, that whole artificial sense of there being a me, what's recognized by no one at that point is that there never was a me, that the whole sense of there being a me to find and seek in the seeking sense was totally illusory and had no real fabric.
What about involvement in thought stories? Is
involvement
in thought stories? Thought stories. Does that depend on having a me or the me?
The thought arises out of everything. Comes out of nothing. There is only no thing, and everything is no thing appearing as everything. And a part of that is thought. So thought comes out of no thing, enters that consciousness or that body form, or that brain. And then all of a sudden there's a me there. The me will take ownership of that thought and give it energy and speak to it. And then the energy that it gives it creates a sort of energetic exchange. So it builds up more and more of a story around a thought. Not always, but often. So when there is no me, a thought arises in the brain, and because it can't find anybody to speak to, it just collapses back into nothing. Everything comes out of no thing and goes back into nothing.
Thank you.
Me is like a sticky bun. It attracts everything. It wants to own everything. It wants everything for itself, including enlightenment.
What is a bun? What is a bun?
A bun, a sticky cake. A cake with cream on it. Cake with cream. Thought really is only a story. A thought is just a story.
What do you mean by that?
Well, any thought is just a collection of words which tell a story, short or long. So essentially, me lives in an apparent story that it thinks is real, and so any thought about that story then is real and has some significance to me. When there's no me, there's nothing that's significant anymore, because everything is simply what it is.
And thought has no meaning then?
No, nothing has any meaning or purpose. It only is what it is. It's only the me that believes or invests in the idea of purpose or meaning, because it thinks it's living in a story, and it also thinks that it can make that story better. So obviously any thought about that story has a significance and importance to me. And me hopes that it'll be able to manipulate that thought or use it in a way to make its story better. And sometimes for a little while it can seem to be like, it can seem to do that. But everything for the me is transient, because me only exists in what will be, not in what is. So it's always living in a story of what's coming next.
Or the past.
Or the past, yeah. Past or the future, never this.
But all this can disappear for a while.
There can be a period which we call awakening, where there's a dancing between meing and being. And, the me is there quite a lot, and then there's nothing, and then the me is there back again. And then finally, one day, the me doesn't come back anymore, and there's nothing left but what is. Well, no, it's like, no. An illusion can't dispel an illusion. No.
Sorry, I don't understand.
An
illusion. Okay. Okay. No, you said that the me can't do anything to
No, because there isn't
get
a
rid
me.
of itself.
There's no me, so it's difficult to get rid of it. Really.
It's just very frustrating, because I'm here to get rid of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is, because you're chasing a dream. There isn't anything to get rid of. It's an illusion. So an illusion can't dispel an illusion.
So when we get tied up in the stories and the dramas...
And the drama of trying to get rid of itself.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the more it tries, the bigger it gets.
Yeah.
All processes, all teaching processes about becoming enlightened or getting rid of the me are simply a part of the story, and just make the storyteller bigger. Because the me, which is the storyteller in a way, or the story maker, is going on, getting bigger and bigger, trying to bring about an impossible task. It's wonderfully, beautifully futile, because there's something else just beyond it. So chasing fulfillment is like trying to catch air with the butterfly net. It's completely futile, but in another way it points to something else. All there is air. So the me is trying to catch something that already is everything.
So it's a matter of stopping at some point.
Well, the trouble is the me can't stop either. The whole energy of me, because it's an artificial experience in a separate world, then the whole experience and the energy of me is to seek home. It can't help but go on, seeking to come back home.
There's nothing one can do.
No, there's nothing to do, because this is already home. Me lives in its own home, but can't recognise that, because it's looking for an object in the home. It wants something called enlightenment or fulfillment. And there's no possibility that it can see that what it's looking for is already everything. It's not an object, it already is all there is.
You said it's an energetic thing, this change, and you don't recognize it. The body doesn't recognize it. So does it go slow or fast, or does it change? Comes it back? This feeling of me, or how does it?
Oh, of course, everything can change. Energy is just free to be energy is all there is. So energy can be anything. And it can be a contracted energy too. It's free, so it can also be contracted or unfree. Otherwise it wouldn't be free. So in the body of the human being, that contracted energy can change, be more, be less, be nothing, be there, be not there. It's completely unpredictable. But invariably, I would say that the majority of the me's experience is that it's more or less in the state of contraction or separation most of its waking day. But that's normal for it. That's what it thinks is normal. Go out in the world and people, go down the road, and people will, if you describe that to people, they'll think you're balmy. If you say there's no one in there and the sense of me is artificial, people will just ridicule it because they feel they're so in that world and feel it's so real that they can't be anything else but that. They can't imagine a world without me. And even to the extent that, me is the managing director of the world. I don't know whether you've noticed that, but in the last few million years that me's been around, it's been quite dominant. Yeah? So it believes it's real. And it believes it has real free will and choice and can influence itself and the world. But that energy does vary a lot in the body. It's stronger or it's weaker. And in deep sleep, it's not there at all. In very deep sleep, there's no sense of a me. There's just nothing but what is. And then the me has a dream in the night, and a dream, Then it wakes up, and then it's sweet because it thinks it's stopped dreaming. But it's still in the dream of me.
So it is a dream.
Yeah, the dream of me. Yeah.
I had the experience in former times. Sometimes it happens that I'm sitting somewhere and suddenly I think I'm dreaming everything.
Yeah.
Is it like
Yeah, that you are dreaming. The me dreams that it is real and everything around it is real. So the me never sees the tree or the sky or another person as they naturally are. It sees them as objects. In the perception of me, everything is turned into an object, a separate object. So it lives in a strange, separate world that it thinks is real.
Thank you.
So is furniture also energy?
Sorry?
Furniture like chairs and tables, is this?
Chairs are just energy. What's wonderful is that the human being believes that it has some special potential to find out the ultimate truth about the world, and thinks it has a special favoured position to find out what the truth of the reality is. And it rushes around trying to find that, and never will. But everything else is actually living that ultimate truth. Everything else is simply being. Chairs are simply being. Floors are simply being. Everything is simply being because it doesn't have any sense of a separate identity.
So except for human beings?
Sorry? Except for human beings, yeah. It's a uniquely human dream.
Thank you.
Mainly because of the sophistication of the brain. The human being has a far more sophisticated brain than any animal and has the ability to abstract a sense of having a separate identity.
That currently there's a lot of resistance against events happening, but I don't want to happen as they do. And I'm suffering a lot from this resistance. Can you say something about this suffering and resistance?
Sorry,
Can you say something about...
Oh, well, it's simply, me is resistance. Me is living in an artificial world and resists that world because it's not satisfying in any sense of there being anything else. So me lives in a constant battle, really. It varies a lot, but me lives in a state of agitation, which is sort of hidden a lot of the time and then very apparent also, because it can't ever find any real satisfaction. It can find satisfaction for a little while, but only for a little while, and then that comes and then it goes again. So that's the state of me.
So if there's a person, there is suffering.
There's an apparent person, apparently suffering. Everything is only an appearance of nothing. So the apparent me is apparently suffering. But of course, me thinks it's all real. It doesn't understand the word apparent, or it doesn't believe in it. It doesn't know what is meant by the fact that, or the reality that everything is nothing appearing as everything.
So there's an apparent suffering, and there's also an apparent wish to end the suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Everything is only
there's
apparent.
knowledge that I cannot do anything.
Sorry?
There's a knowing that I cannot do anything about it.
Well, there can be. I mean, me lives in a knowing. Me, the initiation of separation is awareness. Awareness is the accomplice of separation. Directly awareness arises in here of there being another apparent object in the world. Then there's an awareness then of an identity here. So the initiation of identity and separation is awareness, or knowing. I know I exist, I know I am real, and I know the chair is over there. That's how keeping apart happens, through knowing. So neuroscientists have already established that the sense of there being an individual with free will and choice is illusory. But more recently, they've also discovered that the trick in the body, in the brain, is awareness. Awareness brings a sense of an identity. And that's how it exists, through knowing it's real. Knowing, I know I am real. That's the illusion. And I've forgotten what you asked me now. What did you ask me? So yes, it knows it's suffering, and it may even recognize that it's not real, but that recognition isn't anything other than information. There are lots of people who come to these meetings who know this message. They understand the construction of the message, but there's still a me there that now understands that there's no me. That's not the same as the energy of that contracted energy suddenly releasing. It's just information.
What do you think about trauma therapy?
About
trauma therapy?
Trauma therapy. Well, trauma therapy is trauma therapy.
Okay. Thank you.
It's just a way of making the individual feel better about the trauma they have, and for a little while that it can be like that. They can feel better about the trauma they have for a little while.
So is it good to be involved in
Well,
things
it's good
like
for
this?
me, but it still keeps me alive because it maintains the feeling that the me can continue to do things which will make it feel good. It's all part of keeping the dream going. It doesn't have any relevance to liberation at all. There is nothing that can be done about liberation because there's no such thing as liberation. Because there's no such thing as a seeker, and there's no such thing as seeking liberation. But in the dream, seems to be a seeker that's real, as I said at the beginning, and seeking something called liberation seems to be real, because the seeker turns liberation into an object that can be obtained. It's illusory. We're talking about an illusion, but a very powerful one.